Let's talk heart to heart.
Hello, welcome to Let's Talk Heart to Heart. My name's Calvin Clark. I'm thrilled you're here tonight. We're going to talk about a rough subject. We're going to talk about misery and suffering. We started last week on this topic of suffering. In fact, I think we're going to talk quite a while about it. This is an accessible spiritual discussion, and so we really want it to be available to you. We want you to leave your comments below. That's really the lifeblood of this particular broadcast. So we've been talking for the weeks leading up to this. We began by just talking about starting points, beginnings. Where does everything begin? Does everything begin from myself, or does it begin from the Creator? And when we think about self-esteem, for instance, you're okay. Everything's good about you. Psychology has basically seen that that's been a failed experiment in just self-esteem for its own sake. But that's very different than what we've been talking about. We've been talking about esteem coming from being made by the Creator, being engineered and invested and created. And so that's really where we began. And then last week we took a hard turn to the question of why. Why do things happen? Why are bad things happening? And this is one of the hard questions of life. Why are bad things happening in my world in particular? And even more close to home, why do bad things happen to me? And so we discussed that a little bit last week, and we've begun the discussion. We went to this question last week: what are some possible benefits of suffering? Or really, are there some benefits? I really appreciated the comments that were there. People talked about how suffering makes us aware of our own limitations. It makes us rely on God. It helps us learn lessons. It forces us really to trust and to have faith in higher truths. And in some cases, it can help us build our empathy for others as we've experienced our own struggles, our own suffering. We can be better in the midst of suffering with other people. And then just being more aware of the light and dark that exists. One commenter asked the question, do you think suffering is required for happiness? And that really set me into the last 4 or 5 days of thinking about suffering and what that all meant. And one of the things I wondered was, have I come up with something that's not the right the right word? I figured out that the word suffering can be used. It's an ambiguous term. It can be used in a lot of different situations. So let me read you a passage from the Bible that speaks about Jesus and his suffering. You know, Christianity, whether you believe in Christianity or not, this is the heart of Christianity. So you don't have to believe in this to think about this concept I'm about to put in front of you. Jesus said, "Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" He was implying that suffering was the necessary first step for his glory. And that was the question, really, that was sort of posed by one of our commenters. Is suffering necessary for us to be happy? Was the question that he was asking. And we're not going to be able to fully unpack that today, but I want to talk about just this aspect of the word suffering, and let's clarify what we mean by that. Was suffering the wrong word? You see, by suffering, we could mean just misery, but we also could mean all of the struggles of life, the evil that exists. You know, there's a couple of different types of struggles that we come across. Sometimes we come across what I would say are just circumstantial struggles, circumstantial difficulties. We might call them sufferings, but those are natural disasters. Those are, I used the example this morning with my son. If you like a girl and she doesn't like you back, there's really no one at fault, but suffering can result. And so that's the kind of struggle that is circumstantial. It comes about through your circumstance, through things that are happening. And those can be terrible. It can be really dramatic. Let's say you have medical problems or things that are not necessarily caused by anyone in particular, but they're just really intense struggles. That's the first type. So there's this circumstantial thing, but there's another type that we need to acknowledge as well, and that is just the existence of people with bad intent. There really are people who are not good, who do not mind hurting you or me or someone we know. There is evil that exists, and it does come about in history from time to time. You see, the matter at hand that we're talking about when we're talking about suffering, it's such a big topic. But what I want to point out to you is there is the trouble that's a natural part of life. And so when we say suffering, what we might mean is there going to be troubles in life? You're not going to avoid evil. You're not going to avoid all suffering in that sense. But when we're talking about misery is sort of a different kind of thing. Misery is almost our response, you see, to these circumstances and evil people. And so how do you respond? Are you miserable in your suffering, or do you suffer with some hope? That's what the Bible is putting in front of us. In fact, Jesus was saying that the Messiah had to suffer so that glory could come. And so there's a lot to how we face things and what we mean by the word suffering. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's interesting because, uniquely the same. We like to say, I'm uniquely the same. You're uniquely the same. Together we could change the world. And when we say that, what we want to imply is, you're okay. I think you're good. And the problem with that can be when a person is in a terrible suffering situation and you say to them, everything's okay. That's not helpful because they're thinking to themselves, well, if everything's okay, then this isn't good because it's not okay. And if we want to insist everything is okay, it's all right. I understand you're having these medical problems. Everything's okay. I understand that you're having relationship problems. Everything's okay. I understand you were just attacked and beaten up, or you were in a natural disaster, but everything's okay. See, that's not helpful, because it's not just who you are that it's okay, but it's whose you are that makes things okay. What we really mean is you're okay because you are strong enough to face these evils. You're going to be able to get through because you know where to look and how to get through difficult times. So now I want to just twist the question a little bit. Not is what are the benefits of suffering, but I'd like to ask you about misery. What I've been trying to say is that misery is a choice. And I'm not sure I'm right. I'm not positive whether misery is a choice or not, but it's something I want to pose to you. Do you think that misery is a choice? If we've established that the type of suffering that I spoke of, suffering of circumstances, suffering from other people with malintent, if we say that those are for sure going to happen, then is it up to us how we respond? Is misery a choice, or is it something that's necessary? I'd like to think about that with you this week, and we'll talk next week more about that. I want to try to go through this topic fairly slowly. I think we're going to probably spend a little while talking about suffering and pain and why, and that question, why me? And maybe we'll look at some different people and how they respond to this question over the next week. But I'd be very interested in what you think. Would you put your comments below? Would you take the time to just contemplate this question? Is misery a choice? Thank you so much for coming. I really have enjoyed these conversations. I love the comments and interacting with those. We're going to get more into it. Maybe we'll deal with that question directly in a week to come. But please ask more questions and help guide this program in the direction that we're going to go. Let's talk heart to heart.